Hello, dear viewers. Namaskar. Welcome to Moksha Media. Moksha Hiremat is with you. The classification of literary period is essential for the insights and foresights. The different types of classifications have been made in Kannada literary period. Some of them have their own grounds, but in the background of Indian history, culture, civilization, and Indian spirit and Indianness, the classification of 7 types have been accepted. They are pre-Old Kannada period or inscriptional Kannada literary period or rock edict Kannada period, Jaina's literary period, Veerashaiva's literary period, Vaidic's literary period, Missionaries literary period, Modern Kannada literary period, and Neo-Modern Kannada literary period. If we go through of them one by one, we will get some insights and foresights which help us to create literature and etc. As far as inscriptional Kannada is concerned, we have not that much of information. A little bit of information is there. It is confined to shasanas, that is inscriptions and rock edicts. Of course, it is before the Jaina's Kannada literary period. The Jaina's literary period actually starts from 7th century and continues to the 11th century of the Common Era. In the 7th century itself, we have Jain writers which tried their best to contribute classical works to the Kannada literature. It starts from Duruvinita. He was a king of Ganga's dynasty. He was well versed in Sanskrit as well as Kannada. He wrote Brihat Katha Kosha in Sanskrit and Shabdavatara and Vaddakate in Kannada. From Duruvinita onwards, their dominance is continued. Of course, they wrote on different aspects of life and spirituality in poetry as well as prose. We have Shamakundacharya, Kaviraja Margakara, Saigotta Shivamara, Asaga, Udaya, Shivakotyacharya, Vimalodaya, Sri Vijaya, Kavishwara, Pandita, and etc. etc. I have mentioned some of them. They are approximately 35 to 40 in numbers, and most of them are Jains except 5. 4 are Brahmins, 1 is Veerashaiva, and remaining others are Jainas. So they dominate the literary period at that time. Of course, they were patronized by the kings and queens. Those kings were also literary figures. For instance, Duruvinita and Amogavarsha the first. Amogavarsha first is also called on Drupatunga, who is very popular in the field of Kannada literature even today. The Jaina writers and composers have selected their own topics. We can characterize the Jainas' Kannada literary period like this. They chose the lives of Tirthankaras and Munis or Rishis. They wrote about birth, death, and rebirth. They were very particular of Sallekana ritual, which is very hard and in which Munis punish their body very severely in order to get a good life in the next birth. They were written so many Puranas. Puranas is a form of literature in Kannada. It is a historical, biographical, cultural, civilizational, spiritual, and imaginative. A little bit of history can be found in Puranas. Of course, these Puranas are a new contribution to the field of Kannada literature by Jainas. Jainas writers produced many classical works. They are considered magnum opus even today. I can mention some of them. That is Brihot Katha Kosha, composed by Duruvinita in Sanskrit, and Shabdavatara and Vaddakatha in Kannada. Kaviraja Marga by Sri Vijaya. Of course, Nrupatanga patronized him. Shivakoti Acharya's Vaddaradhane. Pampa's Adi Purana and Vikramarjuna Vijaya. Panna's Shantinatha Purana. Ranna's Ajitanatha Purana and Sahasabhima Vijaya. Most of the Jain writers selected the lives of Tirthankaras or Munis for their Puranas. They wrote their works in two ways. One is social and another one is agamical. Puranas are agamical and the lives of kings and queens are social. Jain poets used the Champu form to compose the poems. Throughout the Jaina's literary period, we can see this Champu form. Of course, it is a form of literature in which we can see prose as well as poetry. And Jain writers wrote Jain's version of Mahabharata and Ramayana. This is the speciality of Jain writers. In northern India, only the Vedic versions of Ramayana and Mahabharata can be seen. But in Kannada literature, we can see the Jain's version of Ramayana and Mahabharata, where Arjuna becomes important, where Bhima becomes important, and where other characters which are hidden in Ramayana and Mahabharata have been exposed in Jaina's epics, especially Mahabharata and Ramayana. Jainas give importance to non-violence. At the end of the story, they said the importance of non-violence and truth and virtuous life, birth, death, rebirth, and soul, and moksha. There is a liberation from the cycle of birth and death. They wrote classical works, no doubt about it. They were confined to palaces and preceptors' halls. But as far as Puranas are concerned, they are reached the common people. That is why we can see a lot of imagination, which is essential in order to reach the lives of the common people. By saying Puranas to the common people, they bent the minds of the common people towards the virtuous life. Of course, in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th century, most of the kings were Jains. Some exceptions may be there, but Jain kings dominated the scene at that time. In those days, it was Yatha Raja Tata Praja, like the king, like the people. But nowadays it is vice versa, like the people, like the ruler. So, yet the king was a Jain, the people also, in one way or another way, yielded to Jain's tenets. Of course, as the time goes on and on, as the time goes on and on changing, some changes have also been taken place. And Jaina literary period is not an exception to this. Without mentioning Jaina's literary period, we cannot go further in knowing Kannada language and literature. They used Sanskrit, Prakrit, and Kannada. And of course, they have taken the topics from Prakrit and Ardhamavali languages. Of course, they have been inspired and might have taken topics from them, but they have not copied what is there in those languages. They gave a new shape to Kannada language and literature with their own identity, with their own existence. So that is why the period from 7th to 11th century of Common Era has been considered Jaina's literary period. So, in order to know something more and more, we have to read their classical works. But due to shortage of time, it is not that much of possible to say something about those classical works. So I have simply mentioned the titles of those classical works. The mentioning of those classical works may inspire the listeners to read those texts actually. So like this, Jaina's literary period have contributed a lot to the Kannada language and literature. Even today, without remembering them, without referring to them, we cannot move a step ahead in knowing Kannada language and literature. So, in Indian background and Indianness, Jains have contributed so many literary works to the Kannada language and literature. So, Kannada language and literature is grateful to that Jaina's Kannada literary period. Subscribe and share. See you in the next episode. Namaskar.